Hey everyone, welcome to this week's quick question answer response type video. I'm sorry I've been a little slow on the grading for the case study and for the third assignment from last week. Um, I'm working a little bit slowly through them just because there isn't like objective right and wrong answers. I'm trying to do it in a way that's like fair to all the students rather than like accidentally grading some more harsher than the other. So making sure that there's like a kind of a standard way ends up taking longer when there's no yes or no answer. But I will be getting through them as soon as possible. I'm leaving this weekend for a conference. I'll be presenting on Sunday and on Monday in two different sessions. So I may be a little bit slow to respond just because I'm out. But don't worry if you have issues or anything, feel free to email me. I will get back to you as soon as possible. Like my phone's going to be on me and everything, so I will be able to see that. It might take a little bit of time. I may have to say, can you wait like an hour or so until I can get back to my room and actually type something out, but I will be able to respond. Uh, I'm just going to go through two of the questions. There's been a lot of good questions the past couple weeks. I've tried to respond to as many of them as possible. I'm just going to walk through two. These are a little bit longer, but I think based on the number of people that have asked some questions about this or a full can you walk through it, it's really worthwhile to go through these two subjects. So the first is the hedonic wage function. I kind of stuck with just what was in the book and on the slides that they provided without digging into it too much. And I think that's where some of the issues with just kind of the way that you conceptualize this, um, where those stem from. The so let's start from the beginning. Like I showed in the slides, just three workers in three firms all combined, and then showed what the hedonic wage function is, just kind of like the slope of that. Didn't really dig into putting them together. We talked about the firm side, the worker side, but not one of those combined. So hopefully by walking through this way, you guys will be able to understand it. Um, so starting out with just one worker and one firm, there's a worker in our example that worker A, they don't like risk. They want to go out and get a safe job. So we have that worker preference in the utility curve UA right here, where when we see the full model, there's a relatively low probability of injury and lower wages. They're not receiving this compensating differential because the job is safe. Um, so they're willing to take a lower wage for a safe job. They're also willing to take a higher wage for a riskier job. That sort of that trade-off is still present for them. They still have this indifference curve right here that they're willing to trade off the risk of injury versus the wage. It just the entire thing is at a very low level. So the risk that they're willing to take for this is something like walking up the stairs every morning into the office without a handrail. So it's not really risky by any stretch of the imagination when you consider the like entire possibility, the whole range of jobs and their risk level. However, they are willing to make some trade-offs within that. Here we have the isoprofit curve for a firm that shows all the combinations of wage and risk that yield the same profit. So right here, this pi profit for firm X is right there. So at any point along this line, the different combinations of wages and the probability of injuries that the workers face on the job will yield the same profit level. So while the individual has the same amount of utility anywhere along their indifference curve, the firm has the same level of profit everywhere along this isoprofit curve. So no matter like down here where there's a lower risk of probability and a lower wage, up here we have a higher risk of probability and a higher wage. The firm is indifferent between the two because it's the same level of profit. So they will make the decision solely based on that. It'll be a combination between that and what the worker is comfortable with. So the point here, PA, that's where these two curves are tangent to each other. So that's where the firm and the individual will be happy to work together at that wage and at that level of risk of injury. So what that means is that this point PA is the best combination for the worker of risk of injury and the wage that they can receive from this firm, they can get at this firm. If the curves weren't tangent to each other, so they crossed each other, the individual could make themselves better off. They could do better by reducing risk or increasing the wage. So if they were on this, oh, this is from the firm side. So let's switch it to the firm side. So if the firm didn't choose to produce there, to design their production in that way. If they were out here at a different level of profit, you see there are two places where it crosses the workers' indifference curve. So they can move out from this lower level of profit out to a higher level of profit, all the way out to this point where they're tangent to each other. Right here at this level of profit for this worker, it's not a perfect match. So we focus on the point, this tangent point, where neither can make themselves better off by a slightly different range by altering it in some way. Now, this right here shows another situation. So firm Y has the ISO profit curve of pi Y. So that's theirs right here, which is out to the right of the like firm X's profit curve and to the right of this worker's indifference curve. So instead of a safe office job, this might be working with Daryl in the warehouse. It's still relatively safe as long as Michael isn't pulling out ladders from under people. But the isoprofit curve for this firm doesn't cross the worker's indifference curve. So while it's still maybe relatively safe, it is still too risky for this worker to want to do. That means that the worker feels that this job is too risky, and there's no amount of money that someone could pay them to do this job. There's just no way that this job could be made safe enough for them to take at this level of profit for the firm. The firm could make it that safe, shift their isoprofit curve to the left, but by doing that would reduce their profit level below what they consider to be acceptable. Because there's a mismatch like this and these lines don't not just cross each other, but even come near each other, this shows that there is a mismatch. These two, the worker and the firm, will not be able to contract together. The firm can't hire this worker. The worker would not be willing to accept an offer from this firm. Neither side wants it. So you can think of it in your own life. There are jobs that you see as just too risky. You would not be willing to take no matter how much they would offer you. But some workers do like risk, or they're willing to accept this risk for a higher wage. So one of the examples I think of, I don't remember if I talked about this in the lecture or not, so I apologize if I did, but I recorded them a while ago now. My best friends growing up had an older brother who served in Afghanistan, and he was over there and saw like real action for several years. So he didn't really get fazed by risk when he came back because it was so much less, chaotic than what he had experienced over in Afghanistan. So he started a tree trimming business with one of his friends. And basically what he did was swing from branches in these 100-year-old oak trees or maple trees with a chainsaw, cutting off the higher branches. My parents had him and his buddy who ran the company together, trim one of the trees in our backyard. My dad said he had to just like go inside and stop watching because he was too freaked out by it. But he was really willing to accept this risk, far above what most people were willing to do. And there are some people that really like that. Going undersea to look at like the wrecks of the Titanic or something. Submarines, people are willing to go into caves. There's some really interesting, fascinating jobs out there that I am not willing to do. Way, way too risky, but still look cool. For some people, they're cool enough that they're willing to do it. So people working those jobs would be way up here. There's a lot higher risk of injury, and they're also going to end up receiving higher wages. They wouldn't be be happy to work a job that's down here that's relatively safe. They're willing, maybe you would say they're risk loving, that they actually not just do they have a high tolerance for risk, but they want to take these risks. For a lot of us, it's a very different type of mindset, but people have different preferences. One of the examples I gave in my Principles of Microeconomics course for people having different preferences is my dad liking Little Caesars pizza. He actually doesn't just accept it because it's cheap, but he enjoys Little Caesars pizza. Even though there are good pizza places in town, he would choose that. He would go out of his way to choose it. Seems nuts to me, but that's just him having different preferences. So people can have all sorts of different preferences for risk. And when we put them together, different combinations of firms and individuals with varying levels of risk in the jobs and in their willingness to accept on the worker side, we can get at this hedonic wage function. So we can plot, and this is just an example of 3 firms and 3 workers that are all willing to accept the riskiness and the wage of each job. So there's low risk, medium, and high risk. So the thick blue line is what we call a hedonic wage function. What it basically does is connect all the points where the firms and workers meet. So here, it literally does connect them and they end up in a perfectly straight line. So we can see a pattern start to develop. So the first is the simplest idea is that as the risk of a job increases, if you hold everything else constant, higher wages will be offered for that job because you need to compensate people for the additional risk that they're facing. So if you're offered two jobs that are the same in every way, except one has a higher risk of injury, the riskier one is going to have to pay more to get you to take that job. Now, a lot of jobs that we think about, in our minds, there's very low risk, so it's not something you're really worried about between them. But there are a lot of other jobs that do have risks associated with them. So that's why we talk about this, even though it may not be the easiest thing to imagine in your mind. So the hedonic wage function kind of shows this trade-off between riskiness and higher wages. So as we go up and the probability of injury increases as we go up this way, moving anywhere to the right, we also end up being firms need to offer a higher wage, and individuals are only willing to take that job if they get offered a higher wage. So that's why we move up into the right. So higher probability of injury, but also higher wages. Now you may think this looks a little too perfect, and you would be right. The reality looks more like this. I hand drew a few indifference curves and isoprofit curves. Basically, we can use a line of best fit on well, it's basically a scatter plot. So while not every single combination lies perfectly on that line, that hedonic wage function right here is the best approximation of this trade-off. It's not some kind of perfect thing that exists in nature. It's just kind of this idea, a way to visualize this idea, and we can also express it mathematically, although we're not going to do too many equations in this class. It's just not appropriate and really not necessary. A lot of times it can just get confusing if all we're doing is working with these ideas. But this shows that sort of trade-off that all things being equal, safer jobs are going to pay lower wages and riskier jobs are going to pay higher wages. There's that compensating differential. You have to compensate people, pay them more money to undertake more risk.